I recall the moment I opened the letter. The words were a blur at first, as if my mind was resisting the reality of what lay before me. I blinked, rereading the lines, wishing they'd somehow transform, hoping it was a mistake. But they didn't. The reality was there, as clear as the ink on the paper. In that moment, the world I knew and the life I relied on shattered. But let's go back a bit. It was just another regular day, one of those where you expect nothing unusual. Sunlight streamed through the partly closed blinds, casting a soft glow over the kitchen as the aroma of fresh coffee filled the air. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the dishwasher and the occasional scrape of a chair on the tiled floor. Emma, my wife, sat at the kitchen table, legs tucked beneath her, absorbed in her phone. Her face, framed by soft, chestnut hair, was illuminated by the screen, her expression distant, focused on whatever had caught her attention. "Morning," I greeted, as I poured myself a cup of coffee. The words felt familiar, almost automatic. We had been together for years, so many that some mornings felt like reenactments of the same scene, playing out day after day. "Morning," she responded, barely glancing up from her phone, her attention still on whatever she was scrolling through, probably social media. Maybe work emails. It didn't really matter, it hadn't for a while now. I leaned against the counter, taking a slow sip of my coffee, watching her over the rim of the mug. She looked good, as always. Her loose sweater draped off one shoulder, and her leggings fit in a way that made me want to reach out, pull her closer. But something was off. Emma seemed more distracted lately, more absorbed in her phone than usual. We still talked, still went out on weekends, but the spark was fading. I assumed it was just the stress from work, or maybe that we had grown too comfortable, too familiar. It happens in marriages, right? "What's on the schedule today?" I asked, trying to spark some conversation as I set my mug down on the counter. "Not much," she mumbled, still focused on her phone. "Maybe run some errands, hit the gym, then grab something for dinner." "Sounds good," I replied, though my words didn't seem to reach her. It felt like we were talking from separate rooms. I glanced at the clock, 7:45, time to head to work. My briefcase was by the front door, and I grabbed my keys, which jingled in my hand. Emma stayed at the table, still scrolling. No goodbye kiss, no warm send-off, just the continuous tapping on her phone. I tried not to let it bother me, it wasn't like this every day. But today, it stung a bit more than usual. "See you tonight," I called over my shoulder. "Yeah, see you," she replied without looking up. The drive to work was the usual mix of traffic and morning radio shows. Cars and families filled the streets, all on their way to their routines. The office loomed ahead, a sterile, glass building, as I parked and prepared for another day in finance. Meetings, reports, emails. Hours passed, but I found myself distracted, my mind drifting back to Emma. The feeling I had that morning hadn't left me. Something was wrong. Maybe I was being paranoid, but a small voice in my head whispered that our quiet suburban life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. It was around noon when my phone buzzed. A new message, though not one I expected. The subject line was enough to make me pause mid-bite. "You need to know the truth." It was from an unknown number. The sender's name was Megan, someone Emma had mentioned occasionally, a colleague, I thought, or maybe a friend from work. But this wasn't a casual email, it felt darker, something I wasn't ready for. I hesitated for a moment, but then I opened it. That's when everything changed. The contents of the letter were seared into my mind now, but at that moment, the rest of the day felt like a distant echo. One that was barely recognizable. Everything before reading that message seemed blurred, overshadowed by the weight of what I had just discovered. Before that, it was just another day, an ordinary Tuesday in the life we'd built together. The kind of day where nothing extraordinary was supposed to happen. The office was its usual self, buzzing with the sounds of ringing phones and typing keyboards. I threw myself into work, as usual. My job in finance wasn't glamorous, but it paid well and gave me a sense of stability, like I was doing right by us, by Emma. That's the deal you make in life, isn't it? You put in the time, grind away so you can afford the house, the vacations, the weekends spent pretending everything is fine. But looking back now, I can see how we had been going through the motions. That morning had felt like any other before it, but now I realized there were cracks in the foundation, ones I had chosen to ignore. By lunchtime, I was already exhausted. The sandwich I had packed the night before, a simple turkey on whole wheat, sat half-eaten on my desk. I had lost my appetite, replaced by the gnawing feeling that had followed me from home to work. I checked my phone, scrolling through emails absent-mindedly. That's when Megan's message appeared. At first, I thought it was work-related, maybe a new project Emma was involved in that required my input. But the subject line hit hard. You need to know the truth. I froze. What truth? What did I deserve to know? I opened the email, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a brief, direct note, written with an urgency that felt like a punch to the gut. Hi, you don't know me well, but I think you should know the truth about Emma. I work with her, and I've seen things I can't keep to myself any longer. She's been seeing someone else. It's been happening for a while now. I'm really sorry, but I thought you needed to know. That was it. No further explanation, no details, just those few sentences. My stomach turned as the reality of the words sank in. Emma was seeing someone else. My wife. The woman I had shared my life with for 7 years. Suddenly, the distance, the late nights, the extra time she spent on her phone, it all made sense. I sat there, staring at the screen, the sandwich on my desk forgotten. The hum of the office around me faded as the weight of what I had just read consumed me. I wanted to call her, demand an explanation, but what could I even say? Did you cheat on me? It sounded absurd, like something from a bad movie. But there it was, spelled out in plain text. I couldn't bring myself to believe it. I needed to be sure. For the rest of the afternoon, I was just a shadow, going through the motions of work without actually being there. My mind was filled with questions. Who was she seeing? How long had it been going on? Was this Megan even telling the truth, or was it a cruel attempt to destroy us? But deep down, I knew. Something had been wrong for a while, and I had chosen to ignore it. By the time I left the office, it was already dark outside. I drove home, gripping the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white as I tried to hold back the anger and confusion. My mind raced with possibilities, with every scenario that could explain how Emma could do this, why she would. I kept replaying the past few months over and over in my mind, her being distant, the way she always seemed attached to her phone when I wasn't around. The nights she claimed she was staying late at work. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as always. The lights were on, the curtains drawn. From the outside, everything seemed normal, like a picture-perfect suburban life. But inside, I knew something was broken. I sat in the car for a few minutes, staring at the front door, wondering what I would find when I walked in. Would she be waiting for me like every other night? Would she look at me with the warmth I used to see in her eyes? Or would I see something else, guilt, regret, something I had missed before? I finally got out of the car, the weight of the email still heavy on my mind. The front door creaked open as I stepped inside, and there she was, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had changed. She looked up and smiled, a smile that now felt hollow. "Hey," she said casually, as if my world hadn't just shattered. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to act normal, to pretend I didn't know. "Hey," I replied, my voice tight. I stood there for a moment, watching her, wondering how I had missed the signs for so long. How I had convinced myself that the growing distance was normal. That the late nights and secretive behavior were just part of the ebb and flow of marriage. But now, I couldn't ignore it any longer. I was determined to find out the truth, no matter what it cost me. The house was unusually quiet that night. Too quiet. Even as the hum of the refrigerator droned in the kitchen and the faint sound of the TV buzzed in the background. The silence between Emma and me was suffocating. I felt the weight of the email pressing on my chest with every breath. She sat on the couch, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Oblivious to the fact that everything we had built was now on the brink of collapse. I couldn't confront her yet, not like this. I needed more than a cryptic email from a stranger. I needed to see it for myself, to catch her in the act, to hear the lies fall from her lips before I could decide what to do next. My hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms as I watched her casually scroll through her phone. How many times had she sat there, texting him, pretending like nothing was wrong? "So, what's for dinner?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emma looked up, startled by the sudden break in silence. "Oh, I thought I'd just order something. I didn't get a chance to stop by the store today," she replied, her eyes flickering back to her phone. She didn't even meet my gaze. "Sure, sounds good," I said, nodding absently. But my mind wasn't on dinner. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to start. Emma was usually careful, but not careful enough. Over the years, we had developed a routine, our phones unlocked, sitting on the counter or bedside table without a second thought. There had never been a reason to suspect anything before. But now, I wasn't so sure. After dinner arrived, a bland order of takeout sushi that neither of us really ate, Emma excused herself to shower. As soon as I heard the bathroom door close, I seized the opportunity. Her phone was lying face down on the armrest of the couch, just as it always was. I hesitated for a moment, 1,000 thoughts racing through my mind. What if I found something? What if I didn't? But there was no turning back now. I grabbed her phone, my pulse pounding as I unlocked it with the familiar passcode. The screen lit up with the usual apps, texts, social media, emails, all there as always. It all seemed so normal. But I knew better now. I opened her messages first, scrolling through conversations, looking for anything unusual. Most of it was harmless chats with friends, family, and colleagues. But then, I saw it. A conversation with an unnamed contact labeled simply as M. My heart raced as I opened the thread, and there it was, the proof I dreaded. M. You looked amazing today. Can't stop thinking about last night. Emma. Stop it, I'll get caught if you keep texting like this. M. What time is he getting home tomorrow? Maybe we could meet again. I felt the blood drain from my face as I scrolled further, reading message after message that confirmed my worst fears. The late nights, the distant stares, the constant attachment to her phone. It all made sense now. She was meeting this man while I was at work, sneaking around behind my back, lying to me with every smile, every kiss. And she hadn't even hidden it well. The texts were filled with a kind of intimacy that I hadn't shared with Emma in a long time. Inside jokes, casual flirting, plans for secret meetups, all of it was right there on the screen. The worst part wasn't the physical betrayal, but the way she talked to him, like he was the one she trusted. The one she wanted to see at the end of the day. The way she used to talk to me. I felt sick. Before I could stop myself, I scrolled further back, desperate to know how long this had been going on, how deep her lies ran. Weeks, months, as far back as I could go, there he was. This M. Weaving his way into her life, into her mind, while I was none the wiser. They'd met at her office, starting off casually, then escalating. Coffee dates became dinners, dinners turned into late-night encounters. And now, here we were. I heard the water stop running upstairs. She would be out soon. My hands trembled as I closed the messages and set her phone back where I found it. I stared at the blank TV screen, trying to process what I had uncovered. Everything had changed in an instant. The life I thought we had, the trust, the shared memories, it was all a lie. I couldn't confront her tonight, not yet. I needed more. I needed to see it for myself, hear her try to deny it when she realized I knew the truth. I wouldn't be blindsided again. Emma came downstairs, a towel wrapped around her hair, looking refreshed as if she'd washed away the guilt. She smiled at me as she sat back down, picking up her phone like nothing had happened. What should we watch tonight? She asked, flipping through Netflix like we were just another couple settling in for the night. I stared at her, my stomach churning. Whatever you want, I muttered, barely able to meet her eyes. She chose some mindless show, but I couldn't focus. The truth was now a silent weight between us. She didn't know it yet, but her time was running out. I would get to the bottom of this. I would confront her when the moment was right, and when I did, she wouldn't be able to deny it. The next few days blurred together, each moment heavy with the bitter knowledge of what Emma had been hiding. I replayed her texts with that faceless M over and over, dissecting every word and careless promise she made to him. It wasn't enough to read it, I needed to see it for myself. I had to watch them together, catch them in the act, feel the full weight of Emma's betrayal before I could decide what to do next. So, I waited. I played the role of the oblivious husband, going through the motions of daily life while she continued her affair, unaware that I knew everything. But beneath the surface, anger simmered, hot and dangerous, waiting for the right moment to erupt. Then, it happened. Emma told me she had a late meeting at work that night, as usual. "Don't wait up," she said, with that familiar tired smile, the one she had perfected to keep her lies intact. I said it was fine, that I would order takeout and relax at home. She kissed me goodbye, a quick peck, her eyes already elsewhere. I watched her leave, knowing full well she wasn't going to any meeting. I waited 20 minutes, just enough time for her to believe I wouldn't suspect anything. Then, I grabbed my keys and followed her. Her car was easy to spot, always parked in the same spot near the office, like clockwork. But this time, she didn't enter the building. Instead, she crossed the street to a small cafe, the kind of place we used to visit when we first started dating. Back when things were still real between us. I stood in the shadows, watching from a distance, my heart racing with every step she took. Then I saw him. He was sitting at a corner table, his back to the window. At first, I couldn't see his face clearly, but I knew it was him, the man Emma had been meeting. Emma walked in, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in months. She slid into the seat across from him, leaning forward as they started talking, her hand reaching across the table to touch his. My stomach twisted as I watched her smile, laugh, and lean in closer, as if this man was now her entire world. Then it happened. Without hesitation, Emma leaned across the table and kissed him. It wasn't a casual peck or a simple goodbye kiss, but a deep, lingering one. The kind of kiss she hadn't given me in a long time. My chest burned as I watched the scene, but they didn't even try to hide it. To them, I didn't exist. The rage I felt in that moment was unlike anything I had ever known, both hot and cold, a wave of anger and betrayal that made it hard to breathe. I wanted to storm in, drag him out, and make him pay. I wanted to confront Emma, demand answers, scream at her, make her feel the pain she had caused me. But I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked away. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken, not yet. I drove aimlessly for hours, my mind a chaotic storm of fury and confusion. How could she do this to me? After everything we had been through, how could she throw it all away for someone like him? I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white, my jaw clenched in a silent scream. But as the initial shock began to fade, something darker took its place. The anger was still there, burning fiercely, but now it was sharper, more focused. I wasn't going to confront her in a dramatic fit of rage. No, I was going to make her regret it in the most calculated way possible. If Emma wanted to destroy our marriage, I would destroy her. Then, an idea struck, almost too perfect. Melissa, Emma's mother, was a woman who could turn heads. Despite her age, she had a timeless beauty. Her dark hair was always well-styled, her body toned from years of yoga. She had always been friendly, sometimes a bit flirtatious, but I had always chalked it up to her outgoing personality. But now, I saw things differently. There had always been an unspoken tension between us, something I had never dared to explore, until now. If Emma wanted to betray me, I would show her what real betrayal looked like. I wasn't far from Melissa's house, so I drove straight there, filled with determination. When I arrived, it was late, but the lights were still on. I knocked on the door, with a plan already forming in my mind. Melissa opened the door, surprised to see me, looking disheveled and clearly upset. "Jason, what's wrong? It's late," she asked, her voice full of concern. I looked at her, my eyes speaking more than words. "I need to talk." "About Emma," I said, my voice tense but steady. Melissa stepped aside, letting me in. We sat down in the living room, and I began to tell her about Emma's changes, the lies, and the growing distance between us. Melissa listened intently, her eyes wide with genuine sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Jason," she whispered, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. In that moment, something changed, more than just sympathy. There was a tenderness in her gaze, something unspoken that I had never noticed before. Before I could think twice, I leaned in and kissed her. At first, she hesitated, but then she responded warmly. The kiss deepened, becoming a release of long-held emotions. I knew this would hurt Emma more than anything else I could do. The days that followed were filled with satisfaction and cold resolve. I knew Emma would soon discover everything, but I was patient, not rushing. One evening, Emma returned from yet another supposed late meeting. Her lies were now so easy to read. I continued to play the role of the unaware husband, but I knew her entire world was on the verge of collapsing. Her lies were so easy to read now, each one rolling off her tongue without a second thought. I played along, watching her, knowing what was about to happen, knowing that Emma's entire world was on the verge of collapse. As she stepped into the living room, I could see it, the slight panic in her eyes, the hesitation in her movements. Something was off, and she knew it. She couldn't hide it anymore. "Hey," she said softly, trying to act casual, but I could hear the tremble in her voice. "How was your day?" I didn't bother with pleasantries. "We need to talk, Emma." She froze, her hand still on the strap of her bag, and for the first time in weeks, she looked at me. Really looked at me. She must have seen something in my expression, something dark and dangerous, because her face turned pale. "About what?" she asked, her voice small. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, my eyes locked onto hers. "I know, Emma," I said, my voice as cold and steady as steel. "I know about you and him. I've known for a while now." The color drained from her face completely, and she stammered, her mind scrambling for a lie that could save her. What are you talking about?" "I don't." I cut her off, my voice sharp, brutal. "I've seen the texts. I've seen you with him. I even watched you kiss him, Emma. So don't insult me by pretending." Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She was caught, trapped like a rat in a corner, with no way out. "How could you?" I continued, my voice low and seething with controlled fury. "After everything we've built, after everything I've done for you, you throw it all away for him? Was it worth it? Was sneaking around behind my back worth everything you're about to lose?" Her eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't care. Her guilt, her shame, they meant nothing to me now. She had made her choices, and now, it was time for her to face the consequences. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling as the tears began to fall. "I can fix this, Jason, please. We can work through this." I laughed, a dark, hollow sound that made her flinch. "Fix it? There's nothing to fix, Emma. You destroyed this, not me." I stood up now, towering over her, my presence cold and unyielding. "And you want to know the best part? I've already moved on." Confusion flickered across her tear-streaked face. "What do you mean?" she asked. I took a slow step toward her, my eyes never leaving hers. "I was with Melissa." The words hung in the air like a shockwave, and Emma staggered back. Her hand covering her mouth as if the force of my words had physically hit her. She stared at me, wide-eyed, disbelief and horror mingling in her expression. "What? No. You're lying," she stammered, shaking her head as though denying it would make it less real. "I'm not lying, Emma. The night you were off with him, I was with your mother. And guess what? She wasn't as hard to win over as you'd think." She gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Struggling to breathe as the full weight of my revelation sank in. You were with my mother?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded slowly, a cold smile creeping across my face. "That's right. While you were busy sneaking around, I was giving Melissa exactly what you've been denying me for months." Her tears flowed freely now, her body shaking as she tried to process the enormity of what I had done. But I wasn't finished, not by a long shot. "This is what betrayal feels like, Emma," I said, my voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. "This is what happens when you deceive me. You think you can sneak around, treat me like a fool. No, you don't get to mess with me and walk away untouched." She was sobbing now, broken and fragile. The once confident woman reduced to a trembling mess at my feet. "Please, Jason," she cried, her voice hoarse and desperate. "Please don't leave me." I crouched down so that I was level with her, my face inches from hers, my voice a deadly whisper. "Oh, I'm leaving you, Emma. I'm leaving you with nothing. No home, no marriage, and no mother who can look you in the eye without remembering what happened between us. This is what you've earned." I stood up, my heart cold, my mind clear. She had destroyed everything we had, and now, I had destroyed her. There was no going back. I turned to leave, my steps slow and deliberate, savoring the final moments of my victory. As I reached the door, I glanced back at her one last time. She was on the floor, crumpled and sobbing, her world shattered beyond repair. I let the silence linger for a moment, letting her pain sink in before delivering my final words. "Don't ever underestimate me." And with that, I walked out the door, leaving her to face the ruins of the life she had torn apart.